Perfect. Okay. So, hi, I'm Alicia. I am a um, cultural anthropologist. I just finished my PhD at UK in August 2025. I am now at Rutgers University as a postdoc in the Center for Cultural Analysis, where we are studying hunger. So we are having a giant seminar in April of this year, actually, that me and the other postdoc are hosting. If anyone's interested in swinging by by chance. And I will be sharing today my dissertation research that I conducted from 2021 to 2024 on food pantries in Kentucky. So I am ready when you all are.
Yeah, go ahead. I think it's open to share screen if you want to.
Perfect. Let's see. Okay, can you all see this well?
Mm. Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So again, I will be talking about this is all wait, how do I make it not do the transcription thing? Oof. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I think you also I'm seeing. Yeah, okay.
Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay. All right. So let me move this out of the way just so you can see. So this is actually a drive-through line at one of the food pantries that I did research with. This is on the road. This isn't even like in the parking lot yet of the food pantry. Um, so I am going to be talking about how hunger is essentially just managed today through these systems of charity. So, I'll talk about how hunger is experienced both by the clients and the volunteers and staff within the CFPs. That's like just the term to describe the food charity in general. And I talk about how hunger is relational and politically produced, and free food is managed through all of these different norms. So again, right here, this is the food pantry line. This is in Madison County, Kentucky, also my hometown. And then above, this is an example of what some people might get if they are a walk-up, which means that they're unsheltered. So the line is long, and the food is scarce, and the bureaucracy is rampant, but we move on. So I just a little, nod to methods. I know that we're not all academics here, but I spent from 2021 to 2024, not whatever that number that is, in my hometown collecting data on charitable food programs. So I did an ethnography. I was working with clients who are the people that are receiving the food, the volunteers. And then they have there are so many different bureaucratic terms for those people who are working and making decisions in hunger relief. I think that the most popular term that I heard was like partner agency, and that typically described the people that are running the food bank, which is like a large warehouse that will send food to the pantry. Um, and then I also worked with several different state bureaucrats, and I went to Washington, D.C. to hang out with the people that work for Feeding America at the national level. So I really wanted to look at food charity from a very holistic viewpoint. And I did a lot of participant observation, which is a word that just means I hung out with them and had fun and took notes. I was there for the ins and outs of life. And I did a lot of interviews, and I had a list of questions in mind to make sure that we stayed on the, food topic of, uh, but they had a lot of free reign to decide like where the conversation went more broadly. And then I just wanted to say also that I don't think you can see this bottom one. I can't figure out how to move this, but this is not research that I did in which I am the white person who's never experienced hunger coming to study hunger and writing about the big O other. This is research that I did in my hometown. And I went to the food pantries that I visited when I was food insecure. And so and that's the first time I've used food insecure in a while. I'm not sure why I had to slip up, but I hung out with the people that once told me no when I went to the food pantry to get food. I hung out with people that I went to high school with, who are now in line at food pantries. Um, I did a lot of interviews with friends and family, people that I've sat around an empty dinner table with. So these data aren't informed by a well-fed theorist. I carry, unfortunately, all of the marks of poverty with me even now. I don't think a PhD can protect you from that, unfortunately. So yeah, this is written from the perspective of the embodied hungry experience and the people that I will be talking about. In one case, I think I even cite my mom when she talks about what it was like to not have food to give us. Um, why is it doing this? Okay, so I just have a little breakdown here of the way that food pantries work because there seems to always be some confusion. I learned this from Graham, actually. So we have Feeding America, which is this giant organization that they meet in Washington, D.C., and they go advocate and lobby for TFAP. And that is a really important part of the Farm Bill that everyone should know about. Then we have your state partner agencies, which would be like Feeding Kentucky. Not all states are part of Feeding America. I don't think if that, I don't know that if that's changed. Feeding Kentucky didn't used to be. They were the Association of Kentucky Food Banks, and then they joined Feeding America in sometime after 2017 was what like the first time I did research with them. They weren't part of the state agency. But they joined, and then so now you have these food banks that are like the next level down. Kentucky has officially seven, I think. And the one that serves all the food pantries I went to is God's Food Pantry, which is a confusing term because one of the food pantries was actually called the same thing, but one's a food bank and not a pantry, and it's very there. There was a lot of dialogue that was kind of hostile about who is actually a food bank and who is a food pantry, because the food pantries were like, no, we are a food bank, period. But the food pantry, or yeah, it was a very confusing thing, and there was like some not so great feelings towards them. So then you have the actual food pantries right here, which is where people go wait in line to actually collect the food that they get from like the larger warehouse here. Um, and that is actually not the end of the rope. I have, a hard stop right here just to show you, sort of how the whole structure works. But in reality, like the food doesn't stop right here. Like it's not like, oh, well, we're like finally in the food pantry and we made it to the plate of the person that's hungry. That's just not the way it works. There's like a whole like second version of an afterlife. So it's already in its afterlife as a food, right? And then right after this point, it has like an afterlife sometimes in which it's shared between neighbors. It's put into different mutual aid groups. It's refused in some way. So it actually doesn't stop there. So charitable food in the United States is not actually charitable food. So when I was in Washington, D.C., and they being Feeding America often referred to what was called like a hunger cliff, because that means that SNAP does not actually feed hungry people, but we already know that. Um, they are viewed as like supplemental food or emergency food, but that's not the case. Most people that visit the food pantry are regular customers of the food pantry. And I have a little snarky thing on the bottom. Feeding America Network claims to have provided over 6.6 billion meals. And I think that from what I learned, it seems like they reached that number through weighing food. There was a lot of confusion about how that was actually reached. Um, but they claim to have provided 6.6 billion meals. There is a huge problem in the US, obviously, and hunger, while it's so it's it's the symptom, but it's not the problem actually. The problem is that there is an everyday life of crisis that people are facing. That it is structural violence. It is it is hard to be fed. It is hard to have health coverage. It is hard to have a home. It is hard to have a car. It is hard to do everything. But hunger is the thing that we care about. Um, even and especially for children. So this quote was from a single mom, and so we know that women are disproportionately affected by hunger. Um, so she's talking about how formula um, during the pandemic was like this like central cause of concern. But for her, like that wasn't a new worry. So I started this research right after like the height of COVID in 2021, just to see what new things were sort of taking place in the food pantries in light of the pandemic. But what I found is that on the client side, there really wasn't much of a difference because everything had consistently been a crisis. Because structural poverty is much like um, it's a cage and a cast, and it's very difficult to make your way out of that if you are born into that situation. So for them, it was a lifelong condition that was like, well, I mean, we've consistently wondered where our next meal is going to come from. The real crisis was on the side of the food pantries. Um, so another quote about having your kids in the car because you can't afford childcare and trying to figure out how you're going to go into all of these different spaces for emergency food when your kids are cranky and miserable and you're just trying to I mean they're hungry and you're hungry and just how hard that is and the quote that I'll take whatever you offer if you decide I'm worth any value. This was someone that was unsheltered. And I had spent some time with them at their encampment, and the mayor had just torn it down actually because it was an eyesore to them. And I hugged this person at the end of our interview, and they cried because I treated them like a human. And this quote, which you can't see at the bottom, speaks to like they treat us like we're subhuman here. Um, so it wasn't necessarily a new crisis that we like suddenly noticed after the pandemic. For the people in the study and for the people in my family and I mean sometimes even for me it was a very continued crisis um that didn't feel new or novel after the pandemic. I think what really sort of shocked people was that there were new faces now coming to the food pantry because the lines are now longer. So now the people that have consistently been relying on food charity are having to wait in line longer and often be told no, because there are more hungry people now. So this was a quote that I heard very often. Whenever you donate $1, we receive seven. This is you can't see from the picture, but the absolute um, beauty of the Washington, D.C. Feeding America event. It was so opulent. I've never tried foods that I tried. I'd never heard of certain foods that we had eaten that day. Um, all in the name of hunger relief. It was really interesting. And then this is like another table at the food pantry level to kind of ask for support and they show you right here like this is what we try to give people try. Um, but it's free food, but it's not actually free. I think that people pay for it in other ways because it's really spiritual and it's deeply political and bureaucratic. So the cost of free food is it's certainly not free. Religious labors are really important. And most of the food pantries that I talked with were deeply religious. They pretty much always had some type of like religious name. They sometimes operated out of a church. Most, I would say, if not all of the volunteers that I spoke with used religion, and by religion, I mean Christianity. This is Eastern Kentucky, as their reason for showing up and for caring. Um, it was a central part of the food charity. They would pretty much always quote scripture as to like why they really care about hunger. Um, and there was a tent, like there was a free like a free Bible tent. I think that they were called Gideons. Does that seem right? I'm not very religious savvy, so I'm not sure. But there were there was a large push to give your life to Christ if you were hungry. That was one critical part of the way that free food technically isn't free, because it you had to perform a religious script to receive it. So even when you were told no, it was expected that you would say, well, like, thank you, I'll be praying. Like it's um, very religiously focused. Um, for those of you who are following the news right now with all the popularity of Andy Bashir, will notice that that is Andy Bashir. He had just given uh, over $1 million to a food pantry, a food pantry. So again, this is a place where you receive food, not the large warehouse. He had just given $1 million to a food pantry so they could have a separate food warehouse. And this is like where like they're like, no, we're a food bank. And they do store a lot of food and they do help out the surrounding counties in Kentucky. Um, so they were praying, and I found this to be so interesting, not for hungry people as they're all like celebrating this large exchange of money. They are praying for the food pantry staff as community stewards who are like helping spread the word of God through the community through this food charity. And then this is from a volunteer at that same food pantry. People are hungry and they come to the food bank to get bread. I hand them bread donations, and I just want to insert right there. Sometimes they hand them bread donations. That is not guaranteed. And spiritual bread. I hand out Bibles and I offer to pray for people. I try to feed their soul humanness to help. And I want to help people who are not getting government benefits. So he wants to help people only if they are religious and want to partake in this spiritual exchange. They are willing to receive the free spiritual bread that he's offering, even when they're denied food at the food pantry. It is absolutely critical that you perform your role as a poor person, and you, even if you're not religious, pretend to be religious and be a part of that exchange. Um, and you accept the Bible. I remember doing the same thing. And even while back as a PhD candidate, I often felt that same stigma and shame, and it is so deeply ingrained that you follow script. You shouldn't step out of line. So even though I'm not religious, I would also partake and like, yeah, I'll pray for you too. And then I'm like, wait, what am I doing? How deep does this go? So it is deeply, deeply spiritual. And there is often a lot of, I would say, exclusionary practices if you are of if you believe in a different religion that might change the way that you dress or change your appearance in some way. Um, I there would be a reluctance to help you in that case, unless you converted. Um, so while hunger is religious, it's also a business. It's deeply, deeply bureaucratic. It is very much so. It. it sort of felt like working at McDonald's sometimes because one of the things that did change after COVID was that food became more uh, it's more locked in, I guess. So all the food pantries that I have in the study, which there are 6 food pantries, they all started to use a drive-through model after COVID, and that was to help not spread the virus, of course. But there was also an absolute refusal to go back to the other way of simply allowing people inside. I don't mean like they at one point let them shop for food and now they're not letting them come in and shop. No, I just mean come inside, period. There was a refusal to let any of the hungry people come inside the building. And they were not willing to change that. There was a drive-through time. They wanted to get them in and out. It was supposed to be as efficient as possible. Um, Even when they're denied, it's just in and out. Like there's not really a lot of room for human feeling and connection, even though you're talking with people at their lowest point that are hungry and sometimes telling them no. So on one day, it was really slow, which this is a food pantry. So when business was slow, I was like, okay, whew, this is great. There are less hungry people in line today. That is really good. And I was actually working with people who would all say, and this was a very old line that I got really sick of hearing actually. I want to work myself out of a job. That was the phrase that people said very often. But on a really slow day, um, one of the food pantry directors was like, "Oh, it's really slow today. I'm getting bored. Someone should go outside to wave a sign, like the Little Caesars guy, to get us more people in here." And and that was a bit surprising to me because I thought that you would be happy that a food pantry was not as populated because it means that there isn't the need, perhaps. But that just wasn't the case. Another food pantry director was a retired Subaru salesperson who inevitably worked his way up to some like larger Subaru corporate job and then retired. And he outright said that he runs the food pantry like a business, and that he knows how to secure funding and he knows that through running it like a business. And there was a large push to dissuade people from trying to open their own food pantries. So the need for food is absolutely it's just astonishing, really. And humans, I think, humans do a pretty good job, pardon me, of trying to help other humans in need. I think that that is really, really critical for our survival. But whenever another person would try to start or like establish their own food pantry just based on need, there was this like pushback of like, why would you do that? We have such a successful food pantry here. Take your resources and push them in here. And there was a lot of hatred between the food pantries. So people that are all, supposedly trying to like stomp out hunger would shame and try to like um, uh, make the other food pantries less successful. It was very, very corporate. Like it was like, well, why would you use that food pantry when you can use this food pantry? Why would you have your own food pantry whenever we have one? Like, let's just all put all of our resources into this one thing that I'm doing. So it wasn't really about hunger. It was about funding. It was about we need to show that we have more clients here because that secures us more funding. But it wasn't about hunger at all. And so that was really, really difficult to see. I remember my own family like tried to start like this uh hot meals situation where she was like handing out hot meals to people because things were just really difficult. And there was a lot of pushback from one of the larger food pantries in the region. And like she got some hateful social media messages and everything, and she was essentially just feeding her neighborhood hot meals. And it was like, well, why don't you just like funnel your resources into here? Um, Another person claimed about, or they claimed that they had to fire a volunteer because they wouldn't do as they asked on the phone. Like you had to follow this certain phone script, and they were like, yeah, like our receptionist is a retired Fortune 500 secretary, and the woman that was here before her wouldn't follow the script that we must say to people, so I fired her. Um, all yeah, all while trying to hand out charitable food. And the important thing as well is that it is a business, but the focus is solely on the donor experience. And so you see here, this is from the national conference as well. Um, Thank you to our generous donors. So it's like, oh, we love you, Walmart. It's totally fine that you don't pay your employees a living wage. And and then you are so kind because you do actually let them have a small discount that ensures that they spend their money right back in the store again, but you're also donating food and like, receiving a tax write-off. But thank you. We love you. And same with Amazon. I mean, Kellogg's is on there. It was very praise corporate, and I was kind of frowned upon for saying that it all seemed very performative. Um, and then there were also supply chain woes. Um, People in the food pantries would speak at length about how they were concerned about the food that they were going to receive and how they were going to receive it. And like, yes, there was food in the stores during COVID, but like, they didn't have a lot, and a lot of people weren't sharing food anymore. So yeah, it was all market logics and drive-through times and supply chains and praise the donor experience, and the experience of food pantries was more so about the volunteer donor experience. So it was very centered on them and making sure that like they felt like good community stewards and were serving their religion enough to get into heaven through food sharing and caring about the hungry, even when hungry people were denied. Um, this is more of the donor experience from Washington, D.C., with a bunch of people that really care about hunger. There's like a ton of food waste. There was like they had so much food that I mean as someone who wasn't raised around a secure plate, I had never heard of a lot of it before. I'm like, so this is a pre-appetizer. This doesn't make sense. Like, why are we doing it? Like, I am already very anti-appetizer. It just doesn't make sense to me. But they were eating this other thing that's like a pre-appetizer thing. I was very much an uninformed anthropologist at this event because it was far outside of my cultural capital. Um, and so yeah, there was all the food waste, all to come together to praise people that really care about hunger, and or at least pretend to. Um, so hunger is also deeply political. This I met with Mitch McConnell. I've shared my food story several times. I got to a point where the governor of Kentucky was like, "Hey, Alicia, how's your dissertation going?" And it was like, "Wow, okay, like I have selfies on my phone with Andy Bashir now because I'm studying hunger. This is wild." Um, and the politics of hunger, I don't think that they would surprise any of you. No one's coming to save us. So if you have that in mind, you're wrong. I'm very sorry to be the person to tell you that. No one's coming to save us because in Mitch McConnell's office, the staffers said, if hunger could be resolved by putting more money into things like SNAP, which we've done, and that is true, we have bolstered SNAP, then why does hunger still exist? why is your family still hungry? And it's like, are we questioning where the money is going? Are we paying close attention to what we're doing with the funding that we're giving the states? Because I mean, we all know about the Brett Favre situation, right? Like millions of dollars going to a speech that never happened. That was not questioned at all. And in fact, this was another event. As someone who was raised in a food insecure household, who knows hunger, or who deeply knows hunger, and whose parents are still calling in on occasion to request money for a $5 Little Caesars pizza, even though like I don't make a lot of money myself, and pay rent in New Jersey, which is also a separate issue. But I wasn't invited to Washington, D.C. because I was a PhD candidate, and had all of these data on hunger. I was invited to Washington, D.C. and to Frankfurt and all of these other events because I have a hunger story that I've written and share for social justice, and I in a white body, learned the language of power enough to be legible, to be heard by these political leaders. Um, and so Feeding Kentucky spent a lot of money on getting me a really fancy hotel in downtown Washington, D.C., and they bought me, like, I've never eaten as well as I did than when Feeding Kentucky flew me out to Washington, D.C. for a week. I have never eaten that well in my life. I was like, okay, well, I have this really strong fear of one day getting scurvy. I'm definitely not going to get it this week because Feeding Kentucky is paying me so well and providing so much food that is fresh and healthy. It was wild, really. And so I went to all these different spaces to share my food story and become this token of poverty for people to hear about hunger from a lens that they could accept, but they also fought back. There wasn't acceptance for like, oh yeah, okay, well I hear you now. Like your family is working two jobs and they're still not eating and they don't even have time to go to the food pantry. So sometimes you literally had nothing for dinner. Um, that while that's part of my food story, that ultimately wasn't the message that they received. It was work harder. And I was framed by a staffer in Mitch McConnell's office, and I will never forget this as a food stamp success story. And I was like, why don't you contact my my healthcare team? Like contact my doc because I actually had health insurance at the time. So contact them and like ask them about me being a food stamp success story. I'm pretty sure that they would argue that there are other health conditions that would certainly suggest that that's not the case. Um, so all of this happened within a system that doesn't even guarantee that you get food. So the long lines, all the religious, like mumbo jumbo, all the bureaucracy, all of the this is like, we really care about hunger and we deeply care about feeding people, yet like, also we'll feed you spiritual bread. All of that happens within the system where you'll often wait in a drive-through line in Eastern Kentucky for I think the longest I waited in line with people was an hour and 20 minutes to make it to the drive-through window of a food pantry. An hour and 20 minutes. I had a newer car that had air conditioner that summer. I was protected from being hot outside. I had a full tank of gas. That is not the case most of the time. Um, Most of the people that would have to wait in line for an hour and a half do not have a reliable car. Their check engine light is on and they have a cracked head gasket and their car is overheating right now because I don't know how cars work, but like I guess like the engine's not being cooled off or something. I don't know. But they are leaking oil in the parking lot and the entire parking lot of the food pantry is covered in oil because of the wait. They sometimes broke down in the middle of the parking lot because of the wait. It was like I said, at one point, an hour and a half during a Kentucky summer where it felt like 101 outside. I had an AC. They don't. They also, if you remember, don't have childcare for their kids who haven't eaten yet today. So the kids are in the back seat and they're crying and they're hot. They're hungry. The car is like rattling and your check engine light's on. You don't know how you're going to afford the gas to get to work tomorrow, but you have to feed your kid today. So you're going to wait in that line. And when you get there, when you get to the front of the line, um, you might get food that you don't even like, by the way. You might get food if, and this is food charity, but it's also political, so it's like a shadow state. If you have your ID, so if you are undocumented, which happens, nope. Um, you have not visited in the last 31 days. 31 days. So recall that I said that the food pantries are all in this tension to like make sure that they get the customer. So that means that they are using the system called Charity Tracker. They're trying to drive out other food pantries that might not have a 31-day rule. And the food pantries that they aren't trying to drive out, they have often used, or they're usually on the same policing system called Charity Tracker. So one of the larger food pantries in Kentucky, the director receives funding from Charity Tracker for recruiting more people for using Charity Tracker because Charity Tracker I mean, that's also a business. So when a food pantry signs up for Charity Tracker, she receives compensation for that because she's like some type of ambassador for the organization in that region. That also, though, means that that food pantry is now using the same system that she's using, which means that they can't visit any of those food pantries in 31 days. So not only are they trying to dissuade people from forming all of these groups of care, but they're also recruiting people to this policing system that that means that it's all logged in the same system. So you can't say, oh, well, I went to this one food pantry and they told me no because I've been there 14 days ago. I'm just going to go to this other one now. No, not if they use Charity Tracker because it will flag you and they will deny you. The reasoning for Charity Tracker, according to the larger food pantry that she receives some type of money for it, was to be accountable for the money that's donated to them. But that was often not the case. It was to prevent fraud, um, charity fraud. Um, so that means that when you have your ID, you spend all that time in line and you make it to the front. You're finally there. You do have your ID, and if you've been there 14 days ago, I've heard so many times, oh nope, not yet. Come back in 2 weeks, and they'll write it down on a little slip and they'll send you on your way. Um, you you'll have to wait, was the common rhetoric. At one food pantry, you had to sign a waiver that you wouldn't share the food that you got there with anyone else because they said that they didn't want to be sued. I looked into it. There's a law protecting charitable food programs from being sued if you eat expired food, so that actually wasn't true. Um, when there was a woman, she was a single mom. She didn't know how she was going to feed her kids. She herself hadn't eaten in, I think it was 3 days at the time. She had more than one kid. Um, she she was weaning her infant at 5 months old because she couldn't get formula. And she, like I said, she herself hadn't eaten. She hadn't eaten anything. She had a toddler that was also hungry. She didn't have a car, so this whole waiting in the drive-through line wasn't an option. And I showed you what you get if you're a walk-up, which meant that you're unsheltered usually. She wasn't, but she she asked me for help, and so I went to the food pantry director to try to help, and she said, "There's so much food in this county. Is she just slow?" And this woman hadn't eaten in several, like she literally had not consumed food. So it wasn't food insecurity. She was hungry. Um, and it was, I was asked if she was slow. Um, but yeah, whenever people tried to help one another, you had to hide that. That's often not just within food pantries, but that's just a broader issue that poor people face when you're on HUD or Section 8 housing. You're not allowed to have people live with you. So, like, I'm not supposed to have people living with me, but he has nowhere else to go. Um, every single turn, um, is just met with resistance essentially. So I feel like while our best hope is helping each other through these hard times, at every turn we're also met with rules and regulations that prevent us from helping each other. That includes starting a food pantry. That includes being on Section 8 housing. So I have no good luck there. Food travels through different forms of care. If you do receive food, the good news is sometimes people do get food at the pantry. That is such good news, right? Well, this is what they get. I sat outside for a moment with a 3-year-old, whom I know, and their favorite food is bananas. And this was food that they had actually received that day from the food pantry. This is what was served whenever we had this giant meeting with Andy Bashir to celebrate the funding that we received for feeding poor people. This is the food that poor people receive. The bananas, this kid was so excited about eating bananas, and I'm not one of those people who think that hunger only matters to children. Hunger matters regardless of what age you are. But in this particular case, this kid really wanted bananas, and there was no way I could possibly watch them eat that. And again, this is the food waste. So just to continue drawing these parallels between totally different realities, this is supposed to be watermelon. Praise Walmart, the corporate donors, for giving us the watermelon or the symbols of food that aren't actually food that we will feed to people that we don't actually view as people. Um, and this is a blessings box is what it was called. People people would often try to help one another, and that included opening small blessings boxes. The funny thing is that the blessings boxes ended up being a second afterlife for food pantry foods. So it would often be things like I don't remember what the food was called because it's outside of my cultural capital as well. Heart of palm, maybe? I don't know. Like so many cans of heart of palm or something like that. Um, because that's not something that people in Eastern Kentucky necessarily would want to eat. So it ended up being an afterlife of food pantry foods anyway. Um, and people would often rather go hungry than eat what was called foods of desperation. So the food pantry foods, which like I can still like taste them to this day, it's mostly pasta. When you do get food, it's mostly pasta, and there might be like one or two things of like tuna. Maybe there's like one thing in there that you actually do like. Um, and it does taste like foods of desperation. It doesn't taste like being fed, it tastes like being poor. And this was an example of another and again, every 31 days is that's how often you're allowed to go. This is what someone received for 31 days um, from the food pantry. And again, with the watermelons. So, and then this is a quote that people often ask me, well, what happens when they're denied food? What happens in these cases where they're caught up in the bureaucracy? What happens when they have nowhere else to turn? And they're either evicted, they're not fed, um, or they don't get the health care that they need. Someone's life was on the line for $300. They couldn't pay $300 for a treatment that was critical. Um, what happens when they can't get that? They don't get it. I have no good news on that end. So this is a quote. There are some days we have no food at all, but I make ways. Usually I ask my family. They usually pull through for me, but only if they can. I only go to the pantry when it's that bad, and you can only go like once a month. They don't give you much, and half the food is expired, so I have to throw it out. I tried to feed the kids a can of peaches from there. I opened it and there was mold. And then there's the stuff that you definitely have to throw away as soon as you get home because it was expired. They don't even check the dates, I think. Not really, because most of the food is expired or it has a really funky smell to it. Um, so that was that was what I learned about charitable food in Kentucky. Um, and while I have been here in New Jersey at Rutgers. I've learned that charitable food here does operate a little differently in that there's no religious component or it's not as strong, but it's the same thing. I was meeting with someone here at Rutgers, who who runs a food pantry for students, and she bragged to me because a group of undergrads came to Rutgers for a tour, and um, on their way out, they were bragging that the food that this university, which is huge, has a food pantry. University students touring a college that like this is this pivotal moment, and they're bragging that there's a food pantry. And so food's not the problem, but where do we go from here? I don't know.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for sharing and being vulnerable with us and presenting this slice of reality in Eastern Kentucky. A lot of it was very familiar as I'm right across the border in West Virginia. We have some time for Q&A now. And one question that pops up for me is like I said, I mean, this is very familiar, the disciplinarian food pantry, even the religious food pantry, but I also come across a lot of food pantries that are kind of the antithesis of that, that they're specifically saying like, well, we feed everybody, we don't ask for IDs, we don't. And so I know you were studying a very small uh, slice of Eastern Kentucky. Did you come across any kind of more hopeful agencies in the midst of this work, or was it all just
Um, I did come across pantries that would say during interviews, we feed everyone. Um, we don't care who you are. That's actually one of the titles of my dissertation chapter. Yeah. But participant observation revealed that that was not the truth. That was the idealized version of what they wanted the food pantry to be like. But that wasn't the truth. That wasn't how it operated at all. They didn't feed everyone. And when they, I mean, like they would say that they didn't require an ID, but oftentimes they did. So like there was this like, this is what we say happens versus like this is what happens. I found that there was hope in that. I have my final chapter is called Neighboring, and it like that is the hope. It's people helping people. Hungry people feed hungry people. That's the best hope. Um, Even within higher ed, we often argue over like which food justice model is most justice oriented, right? But at the end of the day, like what is that doing to feed hungry people? Hungry people are on the ground feeding hungry people because they know what it feels like. And they often form these solid relationships with people that is solely based on proximity. And they will offer you a place to come wash your clothes whenever Rent-A-Center comes and takes your washer and dryer, and they'll help you when you don't have formula, feed your baby. And so there was no, even the mutual aid groups often had to pander to like U Chicago, for instance, who would come down and wanted to like use these like mutual aid groups as like free Narcan distribution things. But then like what happened in turn is that the mutual aid groups that were centered around food. then had to pander to U Chicago funding. So like they had to adopt all the rules and regulations, and like it's the way food pantries just operate in general. But anytime funding was involved, no. Um, I I'm a natural skeptic though, so I don't think it was always very red tape bureaucracy. The best hope was just neighbors helping neighbors.
Thank you. Do you anyone else have questions or comments for Alisha?
I'm I have a question, or just maybe question comment. Thank you so much, Alicia. Really incredible body of work over 3 years, and appreciate so much your perspective. I My critique of many food pantries and food banks are that they're not in their advocacy for either they don't do any advocacy, any political advocacy, or in their advocacy, they're primarily focused on bolstering SNAP. And that's really a critical program. If we could eliminate all the hoops you have to jump through to get on and stay on SNAP, and and the cult of the volunteer, right? So the idea that they're the heroes, the volunteers are the heroes. And I often think about what would it be like if food pantries really organize those volunteers. Like if they took it upon themselves as one of their core functions to do political education, so that folks really understood the root causes of hunger and that they could perhaps vote differently. That would be one thing. But also just taking on, and I know Feeding America has famously said we cannot take on living wage campaigns because that's outside of our mission. And so the idea that there is um, that hunger is a symptom of many intersectional root cause issues, and one of them is economic injustice. So anyway, I guess it's more of a comment than a question, but I'm assuming that it sounds like I don't know if the Feeding America Food Bank in Kentucky does any advocacy, or if you've run into that at all.
No, I so I tried to get them to help advocate for SNAP. But and Josh, I don't know if you kind of see the same thing. There is this like hard work ethic in Appalachia that is like rampant. Like so SNAP is often frowned upon, even from food pantry directors. So they don't want to encourage people to get on SNAP. They want to feed people spiritual bread when they're not on government benefits because it's assumed that you shouldn't use those resources because it's not like there's this idea that if you're on food stamps, you're not working hard enough. So there often was some resistance to people being on SNAP in general. Um, and that was pretty much throughout every food pantry.
Graham has his hand raised.
Yeah, I have a question. I was really very much appreciate what you said and how you've researched and described the issues that are arising in the food pantry movement. And having been there yourself, uh, I'm sort of interested to know how could you use the word being food insecure, and I'm wondering how you sort of define or understand that term in terms of what you might go on to do, in term and it sort of linking as well with sort of Alison's comment about sort of looking at the income issues. So, and I'm sort of asking the question, I'll be sort of honest, because I think the sort of researcher that I follow most about on this is Valerie Tarasak and the work that's being done in Canada over the years, that food insecurity is the lack of access to food due to financial constraints. So if one's going to be saying, well, what do we do about all of this? Is that a direction that that you might be looking at in terms of income-based approaches?
So I actually write about this. I have my first ever solo authored article is coming out soon. And I write about hunger. I use hunger because when you don't have anything to eat, from the embodied perspective, it doesn't feel like food insecurity. It just feels like you're hungry. So I
Right.
write about, so I talk about it as hunger because food insecurity to me is just a sanitized and depoliticized way of making hunger legible. So
Mhm.
I don't want to do that, and so I write that I had at 8 years old memorized my mom's food stamp calendar, and it was by the last day of your social security number, and my mom's was 3. That meant we got food stamps on the third of every month, and that third of every month was a reprieve because that was the time when we could afford for 2 weeks, maybe one, to be food insecure instead of hungry. So being food insecure was a luxury for us because it meant that we were fed and not feeling hungry. Otherwise, I would just describe it as simply hunger. I think that my purpose, and maybe higher ed will end up pushing me out because of this, who knows, is to make people face what's really uncomfortable, and certainly like hell doesn't feel like food insecurity. It's just hunger. Um, and I mean, yeah, I would say that my mom would also argue that for kids asking for food doesn't necessarily ring like food insecurity. But for 2 weeks during the month, we were food insecure, but most of the other times we were just hungry.
I think that I kind of remember Jan Poppendick sort of years ago writing that food insecurity is the official euphemism for hunger, and I think that's correct. But I suppose what I'm interested in is where do we go from here, right? Knowing that all that we know about the system and how it's not working and how people still remain hungry, and in fact it seems to be increasing. Where does your research lead you in terms of next steps? What's your next research project?
So again, I'm going to be really candid here because I feel like my job is to make everyone it's just
Yeah,
to say the raw truth.
yeah,
So higher ed wasn't built for people like me. I had to borrow $4,000 from my undergraduate mentor just to move from Kentucky to New Jersey because I couldn't afford it, and I was going to have to turn this really amazing postdoc opportunity down. It was a year postdoc though, so it's over in the summer. And I don't have a family that can feed me or provide any support. So, like, while I would love to stay in higher ed and continue educating America's youth on why they should give a flying fart about the farm bill and food programs, and they actually get mad, and my students are going to conferences and they're fighting back, and I have this army of people behind me ready to dismantle the system. I also don't know how I'm going to afford to stay in this job because it's not built for people like me. And if you don't have family funding, like the other postdoc here who went to Columbia, if you don't have those resources secured,
yeah.
um, you're out. So while I would absolutely love to do another project on what I'm writing in all my cover letters right now is the what it's like to be unsheltered and secure food at the same time, because that's a vastly different experience. Because like I would find that all these big businesses would often like put acid on the food or like tear holes in the trash bag so that the raccoons would get it before the humans did. And they had all these different food, all these different subsistence strategies. While I would love for that to be my next research project, we will see if I'm not working at Amazon or something in the next year. I don't know. I would love for that to be the case, but unfortunately, even with the PhD and letters behind your name, you're not protected from poverty, or like you don't necessarily get the chance to do research unless you're not born into my caste, I guess.
Thank you, Alisha. Sylvia had a question.
Yes, thank you for the very personal insights. I don't know. I think I lack some nice and appropriate English vocabulary to express what I'm thinking. That besides being very personal, I feel also very motivated uh, now after your talk. And I have had also I had a question, but I also have another thought which came up after the last no second last question from Graham Bridges about the difference between insecurity, food insecurity, and hunger. And I mean, there's also this term of food poverty. My supervisor is more into that discussion, and I don't know. In the last weeks, I somehow I don't know. I think of food security and insecurity being the ways to something that can be called food poverty and hunger. So maybe that is also the reason why politicians prefer food insecurity as a term, because they believe that this term, which has now not officially by the FAO, but um, has six dimensions which they could tackle, which they could use and have a deeper look and try to address individually, And maybe it's because of that. I don't know. Could you share your thoughts? I don't know. Have you thought something similar? I don't know.
That kind of though just seems, in my humble opinion, so you have like food security, food insecurity, food poverty, food scarcity, and we just like make up all these new words all the time, and it's like, okay, like what are hungry people saying? Like
Mhm.
how do they define this? And I would say that we can break this down a million different ways and come up with a million different terms to define something that's very simple, and it's just hunger. And I think that these like six dimensions like that feels, this is my voice as an anthropologist here. It feels something like white people in like the Northeast are using to like prescribe to people that are hungry. Like these are the six dimensions of what you're going through and blah blah blah. And it's like, what if we just listen, like what are hungry people saying? Like are there any hungry people that are informing that committee that are deciding on these six dimensions of things? I think that my whole shtick is that whenever we're making decisions and policies on hunger, hungry people should be at that table uh, telling the bureaucrats and telling these like six dimensions people, well, this is what it's actually like. Otherwise, it's just doing the same thing the food pantries are doing, and it's prescribing a narrative that perhaps we didn't sign up for. So I think that while we can use food insecurity and food poverty and food scarcity, and we can make up five more terms before the end of the day, which would probably happen actually. Um, it's just hunger.
Mhm. Mm. So maybe just additionally, so I don't know if I expressed this in the proper English words, but somehow I perceive food security as being the way, insecurity, I mean, as being the way towards food poverty. So it's like, because it's insecurity, so it's still not sure whether you're poor or not. That's like just using the term or interpreting the term insecurity. What does it actually mean? So yeah,
I
I don't
think
know.
okay, I think I get what you're saying. Like
Yeah,
there is a difference in
it's a
there
process.
are
Yeah.
certain levels
Mm.
to access to food, right? Like there are these different varying levels of like we were hungry most of the month. Maybe some people are only hungry for the last 3 days. I think that maybe like the temporal component makes sense. But I am always I am just always not the biggest fan of attaching security or insecurity. Like I just don't think that poverty needs to be sanitized. I think that saying those words purposefully negates the experience of what poor people are going through. And I think if we just use what it actually is, maybe more people, like you said, you were feeling inspired, maybe more people will be inspired to go out and vote differently. And maybe instead of having all these different terms for food insecurity and food scarcity, even here at Rutgers, like they have all these studies on hunger, but they're not paying their staff a living wage. The people here at Rutgers are using the food pantries. And it's like, what if we just said that they're hungry? Like, and what if we just like, did these things that actually paid people a living wage, and maybe using words like hunger is what's going to ignite them to do that, because this is what it like this
Mm.
is the experience of what it is. Um and I'm happy that that you are feeling inspired and motivated, because here in the US there's this sense to look away and to say things like food insecurity. But the thing is that hunger, even if it's not happening to you, it did, because we live here in this country. We live in a place where food and hunger are weaponized. We saw that just a few months ago with some federal decisions, and some reluctance to provide people with food. So, yeah, maybe we should just use hunger. I think. I think that that's the gist.
So a different communication style then. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
agree.
I think that's part of the problem, is that there is a different communication style between poor people and people that are well fed. Maybe though they should, but there is a more common approach, and that for me is hunger. That's a word that we all know.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Tracy, been patiently waiting.
Alicia, I want to just start out by thanking you for sharing, for doing this work, and for sharing it so powerfully. Um, I am, I'm a very, very beginning researcher. I don't, I feel like I don't really have a clue how I actually am to conduct research. And so I've just been reading lots of papers and books, and speaking with people like Joshua and Allison, who've been kind enough to meet with me, and nothing has hit me in the gut like listening to you talk. And I'm just trying to think about, like, Graham's question of, where do we go from here? Like, that's the question that, as over these last couple of months, as I started to realize what I was going to focus on, yeah, that's the question that I keep landing on as well. And one thing that you just said is one answer for me is to use the word hunger in everything that I write. And so that feels like one piece. And I don't think I really have any other question or comment at this point, except that I just wanted to thank you. And one part of what I guess I'll say the one comment that I have, that the religious aspect that you shared, I had not encountered in anything that I had read yet. And that was shocking, absolutely shocking. So it's really important that you've gotten that out there, and just grateful for the work that you're doing and for you being here today.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I hope that you stay inspired and continue doing the research, because we sorely need it. And um just keep shaking tables, you know? That's my thing, I think that I like to make people purposefully as uncomfortable as possible in academic settings. Like, I'm like, hey, actually, I can't afford to come to this meeting because I don't have any gas. So like,
Yeah, yeah. And,
yeah, just use your
and
voice.
a little bit of something else that really struck me is this is a career change for me, and my first career was fundraising. And yeah, I not in this sector, but yeah, the donor and volunteer experience being the most important thing. I can
The
resonate with
thousand
that.
points of light, right? It's like George Bush, like, hey, we created all of these corporations and we're like letting them whisper in our ears, and like they're also making political decisions, but also neoliberal, take care of your own problems. Like, there you go. We are going to perpetuate the system, but we're not going to fix it. Like,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
we leave it to charity, and then the charity also has to pander to corporations. And then
yeah, yeah. I knew there was
save
a
America.
reason I wanted out of fundraising, and, and you've helped, like, really pin it down for me. Thank you.
I'm glad I did that. That's a win for today. Thank you.
Well, we're don't have lots of time, but we have lots of questions. So if folks wanna remain, we can keep doing that. I do need to get to campus for a 1 o'clock meeting, but I can leave the Zoom open and we can keep the discussion going. So Samak, you want to ask a question?
Yes, that will be really short. I think, so first of all, really thank you, Alisha. You know, I'm in France. I'm a part of a collective which is working about a proposition of social security for food so that we can build the right to food and food is no more a commodity as another or other things. What I think is really interesting in what you do about the weaponization of hunger is that we really understand how hunger is not due to fate. It's really organized within the food system and all this food violence. It's, of course, it concerns people who benefits from these food aids, but also for the people who volunteer as a benevolence in those food pantries. And I think if we can just have all these focuses from your point of view as an anthropologist, it's really interesting to think of us as human beings and as societies, and how this condition, this human condition as eaters, remake us equal. And maybe there's something within this. It's not really a question, it's more a comment, but how we can integrate this. And I don't know if you know the work of a French anthropologist. Her name is Bénédicte Bonzi. I will write it down in the chat. She wrote a book 2 years ago, and I think that her works is really close to yours. And that's really interesting because it focuses on high income countries like ours. And it's like hunger doesn't concern our countries. So that's why. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that comment. I will definitely look into that. And yeah, there's this like idea that hunger is not happening here, but I mean it is. Like it's happening to all of us every day, actually.
Ian, you wanna?
Yeah, real quick question. Thank you so much, Alicia. The question is how can we bring forward those voices, the folks that you worked with, in the most ethical way and perhaps the most effective way?
Man, that's a really good question. So I'm thinking through this as well, because here's the thing, like no one has time to go like I was in a position where like I'm in this unique position to share my voice because of all of these other, I mean, honestly, just luck, frankly. I mean, I got a GED and I was like on my way to not being in this position at all. But I was able and am able to share my food story because of the nature of the job. Most people in my position don't have that luxury. And so while I would say community organizing and advocating and like getting people that are hungry and out to like to share their voices, I I don't think that I have a formal answer for this yet because how do we do that in a way that isn't extractive of their time when they're working more than one job? They have to go to the government office to get food stamps, and that takes time. And then they have to go to the food pantries, and that takes time. And then they often don't have childcare because like that's expensive. And so that's a question that I think I'm grappling with right now is like, okay, like we need people that are directly impacted to be in the spaces where decisions are being made, but how do we do that? And how do we compensate them for their time? And how do we make sure people are being heard? And it's just so hard because it's such a structural problem, and there are so many different levels of the structure that attack poor people, and it's really difficult. I mean, I think that it's further proof that the system, I mean, isn't broken. It's working exactly the way that it was designed to. So it's by design very difficult to get poor people to these places, right? Like, how do you? I don't think I have the answer to that yet. I wish that I did. I wish I did. I think that in general, my shtick right now is like if you care about hungry people, go feed hungry people. Instead of funneling money into these middle places that give people symbols of food. So that's one thing is feeding people that are hungry and period. Like we don't need to be so afraid of ending up like them that we like avoid them and funnel money into these other things instead. So we don't have to like face our fear because we all live in this place where that could happen. Um, and I mean, I usually also say vote, but I don't even know that that's like the answer right now. So, uh, yeah, the commons, I don't know. Can we just eat from the land instead of planting trees that are like not fruit producing or something? I don't know. Can we not monocrop and stuff like that?
Um, well, thank you so much, Alisha, for contributing